Most of you are senior pastors who's behind the scenes and helps organize things and make things happen. And since he's been here, I've been really enjoyed the time that I personally had with him. But he is scheduled again, if you look down farther. This is actually, I think, the second time we've had a sub this year already. So it's probably who's on there, just in case things happen. Mark actually tested positive for COVID. He's doing just fine, as so many people are who have gotten the most recent strain. They're testing positive, so they're isolating themselves a bit away from folks. So he didn't feel like he should be here with all of us because of that. But he's doing just fine. He led the staff meeting on Zoom on Tuesday, and he's doing well. So I found out about this on Monday night. I was just thinking about a talk. I'm supposed to talk in April. If you look on here, I might get Mark to do April for me. But anyway, so Monday night, when I found out about this, I began to think, oh, I haven't thought of anything. So I went back a few years, actually, and I don't think I talked about this here. But a few of us in this room have the privilege of ministering to some of the retirement communities, assisted living places, and so forth. And I've been privileged to do that now since 2017, twice a month. So I got a whole lot of stuff in my computer, but they're usually very short talks, 15 minutes, something like that. So I went back and took a look. I said, well, I don't want to start from scratch. But as I went through 5, 6, 7, I said, Lord, tell me what I need to talk about here. And he led me to wanting to talk about peace. It was a talk I gave on peace. So we will get to that, but I was on vacation all last month. And you know, when I was a kid, whenever you went on vacation, you came back and invited all the friends over, and my dad would get his slide projector out and put the slides up, right? You put all the slides up and you tell them about your wonderful vacation and you go through that. And I thought, well, I could just do that. I could probably spend a half an hour with all the pictures that Sue and I took on this vacation. So are we? You have to turn it on. It's on the side. I did, Clarence. What's going on? Is there a connect? I have to connect?
No. Oops.
There we go. These are my slides. So I'm going to, just for a little bit, help you see them better. Okay. So I wore my sweatshirt again this week so you knew where we were. We were in St. Simon's Island, Georgia, which is south of Savannah a little bit, about an hour or so. And that's my wife, Sue. That's our dog, Baxter, right there. I don't know how the pointer works exactly on this thing. Pardon? The middle button. That's Baxter down here. So we stayed where we did because they allowed dogs on the beaches. Another place closer to Savannah wouldn't allow dogs on the beaches. We took our dog. Anyways, so that's where we were. This is on St. Simon's Island. And there's my wife, Sue, if you don't know my wife, Sue. It's Sue with our dog. This is over on, guess the name of this beach? Driftwood. There you go. This was on another island, which was just across. We could see that island from where we were, but it took 40 minutes to get there because you had to go over the bridge, back over another bridge to get back here. But this was just an amazing place to me. There's all this driftwood, full of trees, and for miles on this beach. It's called Jekyll Island. And I'll give you one more. And I was there, a little relaxed. It was a very relaxing time. But you can even see behind me, this is full-size trees. It's just an amazing place to me. It was. So anyways, from there, while I was down there, I thought, well, let's look for some other beaches to go to, right? So I went online, had my laptop with, and found pictures of all kinds of beaches. But then I came across this picture, which leads me to what I want to talk about today. Nice beach, calm beach. Our beach was very calm too. The one by us, it was very, very calm most of the time. But this came up. You remember 1969? I'm looking around this room. I think everybody in this room was around here back in 1969. That's when this song came out. And John Lennon and the Beatles sang, "All we are saying is give peace a chance." Did we get peace in 1969? Nope. It didn't happen. A whole lot of things were happening in 1969. I was 19 years old. Now you know how old I am. Do the math. Okay. But I was 19 years old. I did something that probably wasn't the smartest thing I ever did in my life at 19. I got married. My parents were thrilled. But anyways, that's maybe another talk, another time. But there was a lot of things that happened in 1969. You remember? One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I remember I was up north on the lake and we listened on the radio when this was all being broadcast. Maybe you witnessed it in person, I don't know. I thought by now I would be traveling to the moon. There'd be all kinds of trips. Well, you know, how many years later are we? I didn't do the math on that. Over 50 years later, we're still here, most of us. Oh, Ed Sullivan show, the Jackson 5 were debuted. Okay, I'm taking some of you down memory lane a little bit. It took me down memory lane to remember what was going on when Lennon was saying, just give peace a chance. Who knows these guys? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was the big movie that year. All the ladies loved it. I thought it was okay. But for me, it was the very first movie I ever went to because I grew up really, really strict. We did not go to movies. But by then, I was married in 19 and I could do what I wanted to, I thought. So we went to see Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. What else was going on back then? Maybe some things that went, now I'm going back a little farther. We're talking the whole 60s. But in 1962, this woman was arrested for trying to read a book in a segregated library in Alabama, Georgia. The 60s were this tumultuous time that was going on between civil rights and other things. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, telling us you can't discriminate anymore. So the 60s moved on. It's going off the screen, but in 1968, we'll all remember Martin Luther King was assassinated. Even though we passed this act and everything was going to be so good now, Martin Luther King was assassinated and we did not have peace. What else happened? Oh, remember that guy? I couldn't vote at that. I was only 18. This was in 68, actually. But in 68, Richard Nixon ran on a platform and he said he had a secret plan to end the Vietnam War. I'm just curious. Anybody here fight in the Vietnam War? Anybody there? Or in the military, at least? We have a few. Yeah, Richard. We have a few in the back over here. Yeah. Yeah, and that a lot of you might have been before 1968, and a lot of you might have been after, because the war didn't end. I remember him saying, yeah, I think we can do this in 6 months. Didn't happen, right? Give peace a chance. So I thought it was interesting in 1968, and this actually affected 1969, because Richard Nixon became president. So Nixon got 301 electoral votes, Herbert Humphrey got 191, and George Wallace got 46. We were still fighting the civil rights situation if that many states were still voting for one of the biggest racists of our time out there. Peace, right? Peace. Vietnam, it was a tough time. It was the first war that showed up on our television screens. And we saw what was happening in a way that we never saw it before. But there was another whole side to it. Maybe some of you were in the war and some of you were marching. I don't know. We were divided big time in what was happening. And people wanted us to get out of Vietnam while we were still in it. So there were the protests. In my own life, being of draft age in 1969, it affected me personally. And I'll show you the effects, but probably everybody in this room was affected somehow by all of this turmoil, either personally or by a family member or something. So let me show you my family a little bit and what happened to us, okay? There's my good-looking older brother. We just spent a few days with him down in Georgia with his wife. They came over from Alabama, spent some time with us. Well, my brother Tim, in 1966, was drafted into the Army. And his whole platoon, I don't know the right terms, that came out of boot camp, went to Vietnam, except for two guys, him and one other guy. And he has no idea why. He ended up in Korea for his tour of duty over there. So by 1969, he'd been in the service and out already, put his 2 years in, because I think it was in 68 that he was drafted. There's my very serious brother, Jim. Jim had gone, he's 3 years older than me, and he had gone into the Air Force, partly because after a year of college, he said, I don't know what to do with my life. Kind of where a lot of us are back in those times. He said, I have no idea. So I'm just going to join the Air Force, and maybe 4 years from now, I'll have a better idea of what I want to do. And so he never got drafted. He never ended up in Vietnam. They trained him how to work on computers, which he used very, very well later in life to help him get through seminary. And he ended up being a missionary in Greece, teaching New Testament theology. So he took that time to try to figure out what to do with life. So a lot of things were going on. So I have two older brothers. My brother Jim passed away a few years ago, went to be with the Lord. And then there's this guy. This guy, this is from 1968. This is high school graduation picture of, guess, me. Used to look better. But anyway, so what happened to me, I got married at 19, right? I got married in 1969. And one of the things that they did that year, they instituted the lottery draft. Maybe some of you remember what that was. But yeah, because all of a sudden, you know, they were complaining that those of us who were in school, and I was in college at that point, were not getting drafted because we had this deferment thing. That's totally unfair. So, and it also made it difficult. You never knew when you could get drafted. So by instituting a lottery draft, you were eligible for the draft for 1 year, and they would pick your number. And they go by birthday. Whatever your birthday was, if you hadn't been in service yet, they picked your number. And they ended up going that year to about 180 birthdays, roughly. I don't remember the exact. Well, my brother Jim, who was already in the Air Force, his birthday came up number 4. Well, not a problem, he's already in there, right? So my birthday, believe this or not, came up number 365. I was not going to be drafted. And my young wife and me, wow, what a celebration. We weren't looking to be in the service. But I respect everybody, my brothers, and every one of you who served. So the question is, since that time, have we found peace? I don't think so. You know, if you think through the years that followed the war for us ended in 75. We pulled all our troops out. didn't end quite the way we would have wanted it to, but we continue to have struggles and wars and conflicts. There's still conflicts over civil rights. There's still conflicts over wars. Is something going to happen in Ukraine? We don't know. Peace maybe seems for a little bit, maybe a little of the 80s, a lot of the 90s seemed kind of peaceful, but it never stays that way. It just never, ever stays that way. So Brian has been talking about, and I look back, I want to make sure I didn't talk about it while I was gone, but he did talk about peace back in October. I went back and looked. And he's talking about the fruit of the Spirit, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And against such, there is no law. And he's taken time on each one of these fruits of the Spirit to talk about them. I'm just going to take a few minutes on peace today. And I want to look at what the Bible has to say about it. Paul had a lot to write about peace. He said in 2 Corinthians about himself, he said, I've worked much harder, been jailed more often, beaten up more times than I can count. And at death's door, time after time, I've been flogged 5 times with 39 lashes, beaten by rods 3 times, pummeled with rocks once. I've been shipwrecked 3 times and immersed in the open sea for a night and a day. In hard traveling year in and year out, I've had to ford rivers, fend off robbers, struggle with friends, and struggle with foes. I've been at risk in the city, at risk in the country, endangered by desert sun and sea storm, and been betrayed by those I thought were my brothers. I've known drudgery and hard labor, many a long and lonely night without sleep, many a missed meal, blasted by the cold and naked in the weather. So who's had it harder here? Anybody? Anybody have it harder? Can you say your life has been this hard as Paul? This is what he's talking about. But then you find in his letters, he talks about peace. In spite of his hardships and his daily sufferings, the question I had is, how in the world, Paul, how in the world were you able to maintain peace? In fact, in Philippians chapter 2, he writes, be glad and rejoice with me. Philippians was written while he was in prison. And he's calling on the Philippians to rejoice with him. In Philippians 4, he says this, rejoice in the Lord, I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And what happens when you do that, he says? What happens when you do that? He says, the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Do you want the peace of God? He's telling you right here how to have it. It doesn't matter what's happening in the world. It really makes no difference. And you know, it seems to me that Christians, evangelical Christians, seem to be as upset about what's happening in the world as everybody else. Paul says, no. Do we work to make things better? Absolutely. Are we involved in things in this world? Absolutely. But when we are there and how we represent God, he says, with peace and thanksgiving to God. And when we're there, I think we are way more effective in what we're trying to do. Trying to remember where I'm at. So he continues on, answering the question, how can we rejoice in hardship? Finally, brothers, by the way, you ever been in a group where someone's giving a talk up front and they say finally, and 20 minutes later they end? Paul said finally, not me, I didn't say I was about to end, but anyways, and he does go on a little while longer, although he is in the last chapter of the book at least. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. We can be so negative. We can be so negative about so many things. Politics, the Packer loss. It's interesting, we were in Georgia, so a couple of the Sundays we went to church. We went to a Baptist church, we went to Methodist church. Thought I would be interdenominational like this church is. So we went to a couple different churches. Well, I don't know, anybody here college football fans? Not too many. Well, they are. Guess what happened to Georgia this year? They beat Alabama for the national championship. And the pastor was up front and he said he was so thrilled with it. He was talking about being just so thrilled. In fact, I watched that game with my brother who was visiting us from Alabama, and I didn't care who won, but my brother certainly did. He's way more into college football than in almost any other sport, so he was a little distraught. But the pastor of that church said something. He said he was talking to people in the church earlier before his sermon, and he was saying, I was so excited. He said, Georgia won the national championship. Hasn't happened in 40 years. I think that's what it was. And a couple people said to him, so what? So what? The Packers lost. Who did they lose to? Yeah. So what? That stuff should be just fun and not a big deal in our lives. Some things there is a so what too, but let's keep our focus on what actually matters in this world. And all these other things that are going on out there matter to some extent, but they don't matter as much as our peace with God, how we represent the Lord in this place. I think that Paul's ability to be joyful was due to his source of joy. 3 different times in the book of Philippians, Paul reveled that his joy was in the Lord rather than in the difficult, painful experiences that he was going through. Some of us are going through painful, difficult experiences, but I would challenge you, anybody anywhere close to what Paul's going through when he writes these letters? I came across this a few years ago when I first talked about peace. And somebody wrote this, that the opposite of what Paul wrote is this, and this is how some people think. There are some who seem to turn to Paul's teaching, they turn it around and they say, whatever things are untrue and vain, whatever things are mean and frivolous and contemptible, whatever things are unjust and whatever things are impure and whatever things are ugly and whatever things are branded with a stigma by all men, think about these things. I have to admit, sometimes I do. Not that I'm for those things, but I fill my mind with all this negative stuff that's going on in this sinful world that we are part of. We're called to be in this world, participating in this world, but that's not where our minds are called to be. Mean and frivolous, contemptible, unjust, impure. I hear it on the TV, I hear it on the radio, I hear all this negativity. And we have a responsibility to participate, but it should not be our main focus of our lives. And I think way too much, even in evangelical Christianity, it's happening. Oh, I have nothing left to say. I guess. Actually, no. I think I was going to say something here, but let's keep going. The screen doesn't match my notes. What am I going to do? No, I don't want Galatians 2. Nope, I wanted Philippians 4, but no, just, I'll read it to you. How's that? This, I'm going to get there, so don't read that yet, okay? We're going to get there, unless I skipped one. I might have hit the button twice. Here's where I was supposed to be. I must have held the button down too long. Not real experienced with this. Yeah. Well, anyways, Philippians 4, he continues from where we were. He says, not that I speak from need, I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. In the King James, I might have said this here before because I repeat this. In the King James, it says, in whatever state I am in, there I've learned to be content. My dad used to say, yeah, any state I've been in. And he said, born in Minnesota. Then I lived in Illinois, then Upper Michigan, and then in Connecticut, and then in Wisconsin, and then back to Upper Michigan and back to Wisconsin where he retired, back not too far from here. Some of that starting with Upper Illinois, I was part of all that. But anyways, I digress. It's an interesting exercise sometimes, though, if you've moved around to list it all. I've learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am in. We're all in circumstances which seem good or bad at the moment. I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through him who strengthens me, regardless of the situation. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. How? Well, the slides we looked at earlier, right? By thinking on the things that are true. That one section, I have a plaque that is hanged in my kitchen for a very, very long time. From my kitchen, you go up these stairs into our bedroom and you walk by it. After a while, of course, you don't see it anymore because it's always there. And every once in a while, I stop and I read and I'm reminded of it. I came across a story about an old Indian who was explaining to a missionary that the battle inside him was like a black dog fighting a white dog. Which dog wins? The missionary asked. Which dog wins? And the man said, well, the one I feed the most. The one I feed the most. What are we putting into our brains? And Paul says, feed your mind on the pure truth of God's word. And I hope we do that here. I hope we do that here around our tables. I hope we feed one another because that's part of what we're called to do. Now we're in 2 Corinthians 4. So he writes this. So we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away. Our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction, remember he's in jail. He's in prison. For this light momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Sometimes we don't quite grasp that term, the eternal. I like to use the illustration. Can you guys see the gap between my fingers? Maybe you guys up front can see it. Maybe not in the back. There's maybe a half-inch gap between my fingers. That's my life. That's your life. Eternity, if I went around this room 100 times with a string and went around, we'd only be started. Big difference. Big difference. What are we most concerned about? What's happening today or this year? Or what impact we have on what happens in eternity? Not only for us, but for other people. Sue and I have a friend named Ann. She was at the first place I was invited to by Dave Scrow. Those of you know Dave Scrow. I joined this group trying to get Dave to let me recruit people to something else I was involved in. And he said, no, he wouldn't let me recruit people. Okay, I won't get into why. I wasn't happy about that. But anyways, but he said, I have a better idea for you. And he said, I need someone to lead a Bible study over here at Heritage House in West Allis. Prayed about it, thought about it, so we decided to do that. That's where we met Ann. Ann was in her middle 90s. And we would read a passage like this in there, very similar to this. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. She would reflect on what was being prepared for her. She was 95. She was so looking forward to it. And she would say, when we read a passage like that, she says, doesn't that just give you goosebumps? And every time I read a passage like this, I think of Ann. Ann went to be with the Lord 3 or 4 years ago. But I think she still got some goosebumps. Wow. Wow. That's where our minds need to be. That's where our minds need to be. Jesus talked about this too a lot, but I've mostly quoted Paul. He says, these things I have spoken to you so that in me you may have peace. His message was so that we could have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world. We worry way too much. Is there going to be a war in Ukraine? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? Is COVID ever going to end? What's more important? What's more important? Do we have to deal with these things? Of course. Where's our focus? It says blank slide, so I'm expecting that. Because I want you to focus on this. There's a story that came out of a man from the 3rd century. So we're, what are we talking, 1700 years ago, the early Christian church. And he wrote this. They found this written. He says, as a 3rd century man was anticipating death, he penned these words to a friend. So here's his words. It's a bad world, an incredibly bad world. Still is, right? But I have discovered in the midst of a quiet and holy people who have learned a great secret. They have found a joy which is 1,000 times better than any pleasure of our sinful life. They are despised and persecuted, but they care not. They are masters of their souls. They have overcome the world. These people are Christians, and I am one of them, he wrote. These people are Christians, and I am one of them. Are you one of them? Have you overcome the world? Paul told us how to do that. By what we focus on, what we think about, what we do with our lives. Does it give you goosebumps when you think about it? Still does me. It still does me. In John 14, Jesus wrote this, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled, not fearful. We don't need to live in fear. We just don't have to. If we do, it's our choice. It's very much our choice. I want to show you one more slide. And this was kind of interesting. I don't know how much you can read off of that. This was kind of a strange thing. My mother went to be with the Lord at the age of 90 in 2014. And so she was living in an assisted living facility, still doing pretty well. But she had brain cancer, and it took her. And so we had her mail sent to us, forwarded, because you're going to keep getting mail. Some of you have been through that with people who've passed away. So we kept getting her mail. About 2 weeks after her funeral, this came in the mail. It says, Marion, that's my mom, Marion, congratulations on your new home. And yeah, that's my reaction, like, wow. Wow. God was telling us something where mom was now. Where mom was now and where our focus needed to be. Whoops, I skipped. Let me go back here. So anyways, she got her new home, they thought, because somehow all this stuff gets in the, somebody moved, they have a forwarding address, which we did. So it says, and welcome to the neighborhood. You can take 25% off your entire furniture, bedding, and accessories. This came from Ashley Furniture, right? You can take all that off. Well, she didn't have to. It was all provided, of course. And also, hey, 24 months, no interest, no payment, no minimum purchase. Mom didn't have to pay a thing. She trusted the Lord. I had a wonderful mother. And down the bottom, it says, no interest, no down payment, no minimum purchase, limited time offer. They made a mistake on the limited time offer. The offer is always there. And she had taken advantage of that offer probably at least 75 years earlier. She didn't need their offer. She was in a glorious, glorious home, of which that should be our focus. Let's pray. Father, I thank you so much for my friends here. Thank you for the wonderful heart, the wonderful people who love one another and show your love. Help us to keep our focus on you. Help us to experience the joy of being one of your children, and help us to share it not only with one another, but help us to share it with those that don't know that joy. We love you. Amen.